Did you know that the British Isles have over 6,000 smaller islands apart from Great Britain and Ireland? Or that out of the 44 European capitals, only about 15 have direct access to the sea? What if I told you that the Volga River is longer than the distance from New York City to Miami? Well, within the next 20 minutes, you'll learn 25 geographical facts about Europe that you won't believe are true, but they are. One, not all European capitals are coastal. People often assume that because Europe is surrounded by seas and oceans, all its capital cities must be by the coast. But that's not true. In fact, many of Europe's capitals are landlocked, meaning they are located far from any sea or ocean. Take Vienna, the capital of Austria, for example. It sits on the banks of the Danube River, but is about 250 kilometers, 155 miles, away from the nearest sea, the Adriatic Sea. Similarly, Prague, the capital of the Czech Republic, is also inland. It's located on the Vltava River and is roughly 300 kilometers, 186 miles from the Baltic Sea coast. To put it in perspective, out of the 44 European capitals, only about 15 are coastal or have direct access to the sea. The rest are inland, surrounded by land and rivers rather than beaches. 2. The Gulf Stream warms Western Europe. The Gulf Stream is like a giant conveyor belt of warm water flowing from the Gulf of Mexico across the Atlantic Ocean toward Europe. This warm water heats the air above it, sending mild, moist winds that keep Western Europe's climate much warmer than other places at the same latitude. For example, in winter, Aveiro's average temperature can be around 12 degrees Celsius, 54 degrees Fahrenheit, while New York City often drops below freezing. That's a huge difference caused by ocean currents. Western Europe's climate is so mild that you can grow olives and citrus fruits in places like southern Spain and Portugal, something impossible in many parts of the U.S. at the same latitude. This warming effect is why cities like London, Paris, and Amsterdam have milder winters than you'd expect. But as we move eastward and northward, temperatures start to change in surprising ways, which brings us to our next fact. 3. Average temperatures decrease from west to east and south to north in Europe. Europe's climate isn't just about the Gulf Stream, it's also shaped by geography. As you travel from west to east across the continent, temperatures generally drop. The same happens when you move from south to north. Why this happens is because the Atlantic Ocean's warming influence fades as you go east, and the continent's large landmass heats and cools faster than the ocean. So, while western cities enjoy milder winters, eastern cities like Moscow or Kiev experience much colder winters, often dropping well below freezing. This pattern affects everything from what people wear to the types of plants that grow and the kinds of activities popular in different regions. However, Europe's natural beauty is not limited to temperature differences. It also features some amazing natural wonders, like Europe's largest waterfall. 4. Great Britain and Ireland are not the only islands in the British Isles. Let's clear up a common misunderstanding about the British Isles. When people say British Isles, they usually think of just Great Britain and Ireland. But the term actually covers over 6,000 islands, big and small, scattered around the two main islands. These smaller islands include the Isle of Man, the Hebrides, the Orkney and Shetland Islands, the Isles of Scilly, and many more. Some are inhabited, others are nature reserves or historical sites. However, the British Isles are not the only common misconception that needs to be clarified. This brings us to our fifth fact. 5. Istanbul is not the capital of Turkey. Istanbul is often thought of as the capital of Turkey, but that's actually not true. The real capital of Turkey is Ankara. Istanbul is Turkey's largest city and a major cultural and economic hub, famous for sitting on two continents, Europe and Asia, divided by the Bosporus Strait. However, Ankara, located more centrally in the country, has been the capital since 1923. This change was made to have a capital that was more geographically central and easier to defend. Ankara is where the government works and where the official decisions are made, regardless of Istanbul's large population. But just how populous is Istanbul really? 6. Istanbul is the largest city in Europe by population. Istanbul's population is about 15 million people, making it one of the biggest cities in the world and the largest by population in Europe. To put that in perspective, it's larger than London, Paris, or Berlin. Istanbul's location on the Bosporus Strait means it has been a crucial crossroads for trade, culture, and history for thousands of years. It's a city where East meets West, blending traditions and modern life. The fact that Istanbul is partly in Europe and partly in Asia makes it a living example of Europe's diversity and connection to the wider world. But did you know that Turkey is not the only country in Europe that is partly in Europe and in Asia? 7. Kazakhstan sits in both Europe and Asia. Kazakhstan is mostly known as a Central Asian country, but its western part lies west of the Ural River, which is commonly considered the boundary between Europe and Asia. This means Kazakhstan is a transcontinental country straddling both continents. To put it in perspective, Kazakhstan's European part covers about 148,000 square kilometers, which is roughly the size of Greece. This is interesting because many people think of Europe as only the countries west of Russia, but in reality, Europe extends into parts of countries like Kazakhstan, Turkey, and Russia. Number 8. The Rhine Falls in Switzerland is Europe's largest waterfall by flow rate. The Rhine Falls in Switzerland is not the tallest waterfall in Europe. However, it is the largest by volume of water flowing over it. On average, about 600 cubic meters, about 21,000 cubic feet, of water crash over the falls every second during the summer. That's like 15 Olympic swimming pools flowing every minute. The falls are about 150 meters, 490 feet wide, and 23 meters, 75 feet high. They formed around 14,000 to 17,000 years ago during the last ice age, when melting glaciers carved out the landscape. The Rhine Falls is a major tourist attraction, drawing over 1 million visitors each year who come to see the roaring water and explore the surrounding nature trails. But while nature amazes us, Europe is also facing serious challenges, especially with climate change, which is changing the continent faster than anywhere else on Earth. 9. Europe is the fastest warming continent due to climate change. Climate change is a global problem, but Europe is feeling its effects more quickly than other continents. Since pre-industrial times, around the 1850s, Europe's average temperature has risen by about 2.3 degrees Celsius, 4.1 degrees Fahrenheit. To put that in perspective, the global average temperature increase is about 1.1 degrees Celsius, 2 degrees Fahrenheit. This means Europe is warming more than twice as fast as the world average. The northern and eastern parts of Europe are heating up the fastest, with some places in the Arctic warming by as much as 4 degrees Celsius, 7.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Did you know that even a small increase in average temperature can cause big changes like more heat waves, melting glaciers, rising sea levels, and shifts in ecosystems? For example, the Alps have lost a significant amount of their glaciers over the past decades, affecting water supplies and tourism. The warming also affects agriculture, health, and infrastructure, forcing countries to adapt quickly. However, Europe's climate is also shaped by the Mediterranean Sea, which plays a surprising role in moderating temperatures. This leads us to our next fact. 10. Mediterranean sea waters moderate coastal climates from the Sahara to northern Italy. The Mediterranean Sea is like a giant climate regulator for southern Europe and parts of northern Africa. Its warm waters help keep coastal areas mild in winter and cool in summer compared to inland regions. For example, cities along the Mediterranean coast like Barcelona, Rome, and Naples enjoy warm, dry summers and mild, wet winters, a climate type called Mediterranean climate. This is very different from the hot deserts just south in the Sahara, where temperatures can soar above 50 degrees Celsius, 122 degrees Fahrenheit. The sea's moderating effect means you can find palm trees and citrus orchards growing along the coast. Even though just a few hundred kilometers inland, the climate becomes much harsher. But here's something even more intriguing. Did you know that cities at the same latitude can have wildly different climates depending on where they are in Europe? Let's see how that works. 11. Cities at similar latitudes can have very different climates. Take Berlin, Germany, and Irkutsk, Russia. Both cities lie roughly at 52 degrees north latitude, meaning they sit on almost the same horizontal line on the globe. However, Berlin has a temperate climate with warm summers and cold but manageable winters. Irkutsk, however, experiences a subarctic climate with extremely cold winters, often dropping below -30 degrees Celsius, -22 degrees Fahrenheit. But why is there such a difference? It comes down to geography and the influence of oceans. Berlin is closer to the Atlantic Ocean and benefits from the Gulf Stream's warming effect. Irkutsk is deep in Siberia, far from any ocean, so it experiences much more extreme temperature swings. 12. The Ural Mountains are not only in Russia. The Ural Mountains are famous for marking the boundary between Europe and Asia. Most people know they run through Russia, but many don't realize the southern end extends into Kazakhstan. Stretching about 2,500 kilometers, 1,550 miles, from the Arctic Ocean down to northwestern Kazakhstan, the Urals are an ancient mountain range over 250 million years old. They're rich in minerals and have played a huge role in Russia's history and economy. 13. Moscow is the northernmost megacity in Europe. Moscow is the largest city located farthest to the north on the European continent. Its northern position means it experiences cold winters with snow lasting several months, unlike many other European capitals. To compare, Moscow is farther north than cities like Stockholm or Helsinki, which are also known for their cold climates. Despite the cold, Moscow is a vibrant culture and economic center with historic landmarks like the Kremlin and Red Square. 14. Not every European country uses the euro. The euro is the official currency of 20 out of the 27 EU countries, known as the Eurozone. Countries like Germany, France, Spain, and Italy use the euro. However, some European countries have kept their own currencies. For example, Poland uses the Polish zloty, Hungary uses the forint, and Sweden uses the krona. Even some EU members like Denmark and Bulgaria don't use the euro. 15. It is KYIV, not KIEV. Another common mistake is how the capital of Ukraine is spelled. Many people write it as KIEV, but the correct spelling is KYIV. This change reflects the Ukrainian language and national identity, especially important given recent political events. Kiev is a historic city, one of the oldest in Eastern Europe and home to about 3 million people. It's the political, cultural, and economic center of Ukraine, just like Ankara is for Turkey. Using the correct spelling respects the country's sovereignty and culture. Speaking of Ukraine, here's a geographical fact about the country that we often forget. 16. Ukraine is the second largest country in Europe by area. Covering about 603,700 square kilometers, Ukraine is the second largest country in Europe by area. It is almost twice the size of France and larger than Spain or Sweden. Ukraine's large size means it has a wide variety of landscapes, from fertile plains and plateaus to mountains in the west. This makes it a major agricultural power in Europe, often called the breadbasket of Europe because it produces so much grain. Ukraine's size also means it has many different climates and ecosystems, from the Black Sea coast to the Carpathian Mountains. 17. The Danube doesn't flow through all European capitals. Many people think the Danube flows through every European capital, but it actually passes through only 4: Vienna, Austria, Bratislava, Slovakia, Budapest, Hungary, and Belgrade, Serbia. That's just a handful out of Europe's 47 countries. The Danube's basin covers a massive 817,000 square kilometers, 315,000 square miles, touching 19 countries, but it doesn't run through capitals like Berlin or Paris. This shows how rivers can shape regions, but don't always connect every major city. 18. Brussels is not the official capital of the European Union. Brussels is often called the de facto capital of the European Union, but it's important to understand what that really means. The EU, unlike a single country, doesn't have an official capital city. Instead, Brussels hosts the main offices of many key EU institutions, such as the European Commission, the Council of the European Union, and the European Council. These institutions are where important decisions about the EU's future are made. Because so many EU activities happen there, Brussels is seen as the EU's political heart, even though it's not officially declared the capital. However, the city's role is so important that it generates about 250 million euros annually and provides over 120,000 jobs just from EU-related activities. In fact, Brussels is the second most important diplomatic city in the world after New York City, hosting 120 international organizations and 181 embassies. 19. Russia and Great Britain are not the only European countries outside the EU. Contrary to popular belief, Russia and Great Britain aren't the only European countries outside the EU. As a matter of fact, countries like Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, Monaco, Andorra, San Marino, Vatican City, Belarus, and Armenia are also not EU members. Some, like Switzerland and Norway, are part of agreements that let them trade freely or move people without being full members. Others have never joined or are still in the process of applying. To put this in perspective, Europe has 45 countries, but only 27 are in the EU. That means almost half the continent's countries are outside this union, each with its own reasons. 20. The Great European Plain is Europe's largest plain. This plain starts in northern France and extends all the way through Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, Poland, Belarus, and into western Russia. It covers roughly 1.1 million square kilometers, about 425,000 square miles, making it the largest continuous flat area in Europe. To give you a sense of scale, it's larger than the size of the entire state of Texas. This plain is crucial for farming because flat land with fertile soil makes it easier to grow crops like wheat, barley, and potatoes. This plain also acts as a natural corridor, connecting Western and Eastern Europe. It has been a route for migration, trade, and, unfortunately, invasions throughout history. 21. The Iberian Peninsula is the westernmost part of the Eurasian landmass. The Iberian Peninsula is the farthest west you can go on the big Europe-Asia continent before hitting the ocean. Spain takes up most of this peninsula, while Portugal occupies about 15% of it, mainly along the western coast facing the Atlantic Ocean. To give you an idea of size, the whole peninsula covers around 583,254 square kilometers. That's bigger than France. Another cool fact about this peninsula is that the southernmost point of the European continent, Punta de Tarifa, is located here, just a short distance from North Africa, separated by the narrow Strait of Gibraltar. Speaking of Spain, did you know that Spain is home to one of the hottest places in Europe? 22. Europe has deserts. When you think of deserts, you probably imagine hot, sandy places like the Sahara in Africa or the deserts of the American Southwest. Many people believe Europe has no deserts at all, but that's a misconception. Spain is home to the Tabernas Desert, located in the southeast region of Andalusia. It covers about 280 square kilometers, 108 square miles, which is roughly half the size of the city of Chicago. The Tabernas is a semi-arid desert, meaning it gets very little rainfall, around 250 millimeters, 10 inches per year, and has dry, rocky landscapes with sparse vegetation. Temperatures can soar above 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees Fahrenheit in summer, making it one of the hottest places in Europe. This desert is famous for being the filming location of many classic Western movies, earning it the nickname Europe's Only Desert. Its unique landscapes look like the American Wild West, which is why filmmakers love it. 23. The British Isles were once connected to mainland Europe. If we look at the British Isles, which include Great Britain, Ireland, and thousands of smaller islands, you might be surprised to learn that they were once connected to mainland Europe. This was before the last ice age ended about 10,000 years ago when sea levels were much lower. Back then, a land bridge called Doggerland connected what is now the UK to continental Europe, allowing people and animals to migrate easily. As the ice melted and sea levels rose, this land bridge was submerged, turning the British Isles into islands. This explains why the flora and fauna in the British Isles are similar yet distinct from those on the continent. 24. The Rhine is not the longest river in Europe. It's a public misconception that the Rhine River is Europe's longest river because it flows through several important countries like Switzerland, Germany, and the Netherlands, and is famous for castles and vineyards along its banks. However, the longest river in Europe is actually the Volga River. The Volga flows entirely within Russia and is about 3,530 kilometers, 2,194 miles long. That's nearly thrice as long as the Rhine, which is about 1,230 kilometers, 764 miles long. To put it into perspective, the Volga is longer than the distance from New York City to Miami in the United States. The Volga is incredibly important to Russia. It's called the Mother Volga because it supports millions of people by providing water, transportation, and fish. It also flows into the Caspian Sea, which we'll talk about next. 25. Not all European lakes are freshwater. When you hear lake, it's easy to probably think of freshwater bodies where people swim, fish, and boat. Europe has many freshwater lakes, like Lake Geneva in Switzerland and Lake Balaton in Hungary. But there's a big exception, the Caspian Sea. Despite its name, the Caspian Sea is actually the largest enclosed inland water body on Earth, and it's partly in Europe, Western Shore, and partly in Asia. It covers about 371,000 square kilometers, 143,000 square miles, making it bigger than Germany. What makes the Caspian Sea special is that it's salty or saline, unlike most lakes. Its salinity varies, but on average it's about 1/3 as salty as the ocean. This means it's not suitable for drinking or regular freshwater fish, but it supports unique species adapted to salty water. The Caspian Sea is also rich in oil and natural gas, making it very important economically. Countries around it, including Russia, Kazakhstan, and Azerbaijan, rely on it for energy resources. If you enjoyed these facts, please subscribe to the channel and like the video. For more geographical facts like these, watch our earlier video, 25 Facts About Canada's Geography That Seem False But Are True. Trust me, you'll truly be amazed. Tap your screen right now to watch. Thanks for watching.